Corrective measures of the Global Climate Emergency Plan. We must not allow ourselves to break the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. It is necessary to reiterate the basic concepts. The whole system failed. No longer time for preventive measures. In July of this year, the active phase of a strong El Niño begins. It is estimated that under its effects the global average temperature may rise by 0.25 degrees to 0.40 degrees C. We are already at 1.2 degrees C. This pushes us towards a new global climatic threshold of 1.45 degrees C to 1.60 degrees C. All discussion is over about when the first tipping point of accelerating global warming will emerge, by activating positive feedbacks in a domino effect. The beginning of the catastrophic sequence begins in July 2023. During the maximum El Niño, the Pacific Ocean may warm up 1 degree Celsius more. This will increase their CO2 emission capacity and the effect of surfactants to reduce the ocean's capacity to absorb atmospheric CO2. The concentration of CO2 in the air will suddenly increase and as a consequence the greenhouse effect. Arctic soil surface temperatures will rise, more snow will melt, more permafrost will thaw, more methane will be released, 34 times more efficient than CO2 in the greenhouse. More floating ice from the North Pole will melt, the albedo effect will be further reduced, Arctic waters will warm. The release of methane gas hydrates will increase. Warmer water and air will cover Greenland longer and more intensely than in July 2012, when 92% of the frozen surface melted, during 4 torrid days. The melting of glaciers will accelerate. The same will happen in Antarctica. Ocean waters may rise the first 30 centimeters in the period 2023-2025. Most worrisome of all. When El Niño passes, the activation of these positive feedbacks, what new global average temperature threshold will leave us and under what instability of continuity of the domino effect sequence. In other words, 1.5 degrees Celsius can remain permanent and from there go to 1.8 degrees Celsius, 2 degrees Celsius and more. What else can come? Since 2002 I have warned that the breakdown of the planet's surface thermoequilibrium can cause variations in the rate of radiation from the Earth's core. This excess heat could be concentrating in the lower crust, causing a phenomenon of magmatic liquefaction, that is, thinning of the crust, especially at its weakest points. This would affect the fossil oceans, causing their vaporization and possible emergence towards the surface, at the same time as an increase in the intensity of earthquakes and volcanic activity. The most vulnerable area is the San Andreas Fault and the Yellowstone Park supervolcano. From 1.8 degrees C, the probability of eruption from its third collapsing magma chamber increases by 25%. Regarding this last data, emergencies of liquids from the depths in the Pacific Ocean are currently being detected within the area of the California plate. This indicates that there would be a warming process at great depth. Are there preventative measures for this? None. We missed the train of fate. We let time go by, 40 years, we wasted it. There are guilty. 1. The UN failed. 2. The IPCC failed. 3. Governments failed. 4. Politicians failed. 5. NGOs failed. 6. The economists failed. 7. Entrepreneurs failed. 8. The journalists failed. 9. Citizens failed. 10. AI failed. We are all equally guilty. We allow ourselves to be seduced by selfishness, greed, arrogance, and ignorance. And now that we cannot trust the survival of our species to a system that has totally failed. It must be recycled immediately. For this, 4 transition points or pillars must be applied within a global climate emergency plan. 1. Eco-global governance. 2. Global direct digital democracy. 3. Replacement of money for units of qualified time. 4. Abolition of extreme poverty throughout the earth. This new organizational logic will regenerate the forces of humanity, unite them, awaken them, free them, and coordinate them in a cooperative and supportive manner. Failure to do so will condemn us to not survive. We have already tried everything for 40 years, and we have reached this point, at the beginning of the end of our entire species and of all life on the planet. It is time to learn from mistakes and apply the necessary corrections. Either we all change or we all become extinct. There is no middle ground. Corrective measures of the Global Climate Emergency Plan. 1. It will be necessary to activate the Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experimental Project, SCoPEx. We must buy climate time and avoid, by all means at our disposal, breaking the threshold of 1.5 degrees C that could occur as of July 2023 and the occurrence of major intercontinental droughts. We are running out of time. The situation requires the application of immediate corrective measures under penalty of having to face the worst consequences of accelerating climate change. It must be borne in mind that if a structural intercontinental drought occurs for 1 year, all the great harvests will be lost and, as a consequence, between 2,000 and 4,000 million human beings will die of hunger 9 months after this terminal crisis appears and depletion of world food reserves. We must apply all available resources to buy additional weather time, as sustainable replacement technologies will still take a few years to implement. Through an alliance of environmental banks, it is feasible to finance the Stratospheric Controlled Disturbance Experiment, SCoPEx, project through green bonds, for no more than $1 to $10 billion a year. The project involves a set of technologies that seek to reflect a small fraction of sunlight back into space or increase the amount of solar radiation that escapes from the atmosphere. We understand that given the risk of environmental impact, it must be applied gradually, in order to measure possible environmental feedbacks. We need to know how far along the project is at Harvard and work cooperatively to make the funds available. Also articulate with the United Nations so that the governments of the planet act as a guarantee to ensure the profitability of the credits applied. My priority concern is the possible activation of the Clathrate gun at the North Pole. To measure this risk, we must set up the scientific research team of the Gaia team, so that within a period of 90 days it prepares the report and then the IPCC confirms or refutes it, also within a maximum period of 90 days. We no longer have time to waste. For the Gaia team, $1 million of financing is required. This scientific report is urgently needed. We are against the clock. A world where more than $100 million are paid for the purchase of a soccer player and nobody wants to donate $1 million to save the entire planet is contradictory. We must avoid breaking the threshold of 1.5 degrees C and 2 degrees C. We cannot allow it. To do this, we must activate the SCoPEx project and apply new climate adaptation adjustment measures, aiming for zero carbon emissions by 2030. Let's work together and in a cooperative and coordinated way to save 8 billion human beings from the foreseeable tragedy of accelerated global warming. Together everything is possible. 2. Intensive reforestation, planting 30 billion new trees per year to extract CO2 in the trunks and then felling and burying them, thus returning this greenhouse gas to the subsoil. 500 billion new trees can be planted, at a cost of $30 billion per year. The company that can carry out the task is the multinational Aeon from Japan, an expert in forest recovery. 3. Geothermal energy allows the generation of abundant electrical energy at low cost, replacing thermal power plants that burn hydrocarbons. It is a priority to develop this technology in the shortest possible time. A capital injection of $10 billion is required for research and development. The Quaise Company, derived from MIT, is working on the development of a drill to reach a depth of 20 kilometers. But the issue is time. It estimates to arrive by 2026. When this replacement technology is needed now. The logical thing is to finance several research centers in different universities around the world to accelerate this vital technology. 4. Compact modular reactors, SMR, with the capacity to generate 300 megawatts per unit and supply electricity to cities of 500,000 inhabitants or more, at a cost of $200 million per unit. This emergency solution is immediately available and will make it possible to eliminate polluting thermal power plants quickly and efficiently. 5. Replace individual vehicles in large cities with elevated monorail trains or the gondola system at swiftcities.com. 6. Saving the Arctic and the Amazon equals $2 trillion of investment. 7. Produce intensively and on a scale synthetic meat. Livestock emit methane gas equivalent to 3.1 gigatons per year of CO2. The cost per installed plant is around $3 million. 8. Power by fusion reactors. We are already very close. It is necessary to accelerate the step. A strong capital-intensive injection of an additional $100 billion is required to speed up the readiness of this vital replacement technology. What corrective measures to implement? 1. Ban individual combustion cars in all cities of the world. 2. Cut off the power supply after 8 p.m. 3. Reduce the operation of thermoelectric plants. 4. Reduce air flights by 80%. 5. Ban tourism. 6. Minimize hyperconsumption. 7. Reduce the intake of meat and replace it with vegetables. 8. Stop cutting down trees and start planting 30,000 million new trees a year. 9. Invest intensive capital in the development of fusion reactors and in geothermal energy. 10. Go from intensive crops with agrochemicals to organic ones. 11. Avoid long trips. 12. Limit overpopulation by authorizing only one child per family. 13. And in the face of the emergency, apply a comprehensive re-engineering of the world's social, economic, and political organization system, adding a coordinating supranational structure, the planetary eco-government, controlled by a system of direct digital democracy, advised by a council of sciences, made up of scientists from all continents. 14. And above all, allocate enough intensive capital funds, 2% of annual world GDP, to face the global climate emergency in a critical phase. Already the speeches of environmental politicians, of climatologists with their graphs, have gone to hell. They have been devoured by the new reality of the catastrophe in process. When should it be done? Immediately. There is no more time to act preventively. Pollution must be stopped abruptly and at the same time implement medium and long-term measures that allow the future extraction of atmospheric CO2 to stop its inertia of warming. In addition to sustaining the rhythm of the economic system by working so that it does not decline. What are the chances of this actually happening? This hypothesis has between a 5 and 50% chance of being fulfilled within the mentioned period. Likewise, in the face of deniers, scientists must provide irrefutable empirical data that refute this possibility. If not, support this warning, pitch in, and help global society prepare for what's to come. During the last 5 years, the planet has entered into an active positive feedback process that involves 4 natural systems and 3 anthropogenic systems. These are 1. Thawing of the floating ice at the North Pole and reduction of the albedo effect, thus warming the waters of the Arctic Ocean and melting more ice and permafrost, which accelerates the melting of Greenland's massive glaciers and oceanic rise. 2. Acceleration of the thawing of the permafrost, with the release of carbon and methane gas into the atmosphere and the start of the release of clathrates or submarine methane gas hydrates on the Arctic shelf. 3. Increasingly massive and intense natural forest fires in Siberia, the United States, Europe, Australia, Alaska, Canada, Africa, and the Amazon, caused by droughts and heat waves. This reduces continental sink areas for CO2, which are released into the atmosphere, accelerating warming. 4. Anthropogenic forest fires, either by burning prior to planting, felling, abandoning branches, or by carelessness leaving poorly extinguished bonfires. 5. Anthropogenic pollution is around 40 gigatons of CO2 emissions in the world per year. 6. Added to this is the fact that the oceans are losing the capacity to absorb 31% of the CO2 generated by man. Between 1994 and 2007 they caught 34 gigatons, billion metric tons. Surfactants, an oily film that spreads on the surface of the water, reduce carbon dioxide exchange by up to 50%. As surface temperatures increase, this organic layer increases, causing a further decrease in gas exchange between the atmosphere and the oceans. As the effect increases, there will be an inertial increase in CO2 in the atmosphere. Also, when the oceans warm up, they lose their capacity to absorb CO2. 7. Overpopulation, with 8,600 million inhabitants by 2030, puts pressure on excessive consumption of food and energy until the planet's resources are exhausted and global warming is accelerated. There is a direct cause and effect relationship. The combination of all these feedbacks will lead to rapid and uncontrolled heating, the negative impact of which can be compared to a thermonuclear war. To stop it, it is necessary to drastically reduce carbon dioxide emissions and, where possible, remove the surplus already released into the atmosphere. In 100 years we have released into the air what took 500 million years to accumulate in the subsoil in the form of oil. Ripple and Wolf study. Time is running out to avoid the worst effects of climate change, said researchers from Oregon State University, OSU, the University of Exeter, and other institutions in the report recently published in One Earth magazine. According to OSU's William Ripple and Christopher Wolf, co-authors of the study, research on positive feedback must be boosted immediately and massively to help world leaders formulate climate policy. Many feedback loops significantly increase warming due to greenhouse gas emissions, they noted. However, not all of these feedbacks are fully accounted for in climate models, they noted. In particular, they urged the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, the UN Climate Expert Group, to produce a special report on the effects of feedback loops and their potential serious consequences. Once sufficient warming has occurred, feedbacks could ultimately cause the Greenland ice sheet to collapse, Wolf explained. Waiting until 2050 to achieve net zero carbon emissions might be too late, according to the authors. And, in the long-term worst-case scenario, interactions between feedback loops could result in an irreversible change from the current state of Earth's climate to a state that threatens the habitability of humans and other life forms, they added. Possible answers. How to act. GSL Systems and Mayday Live propose to redirect capital resources. Through the Global Solidarity Live, Mayday.live, greeninterbanks.com, 3.0.taskweb.live and microwindows.app portals, we are working to act preventively in time. However, we need the support of scientific groups and businessmen. This report report supports what was sustained through previous notes and the urgency to activate the scientific team of the Gaia team, so that it can investigate, evaluate, and determine the next threshold of climate anomie in a maximum time of 90 days. And then be endorsed or refuted by the UN IPCC experts, also within a maximum period of 90 days, because we ran out of time. We have 2 to 5 years left to apply drastic cushioning measures on a planetary scale. According to WMO predictions, we will exceed the threshold of 1.5 to 1.8 degrees Celsius in the next 5 years. Then large intercontinental structural droughts can occur. As a consequence, half of the world's population may starve to death as scarce food reserves are depleted. This data has already been surpassed by reality. As of July 2023, a strong El Niño will begin with a 60% probability, and the average temperature will jump more than 0.20 degrees C. Our priority concern is the possible activation of the Clathrate gun at the North Pole. To measure this risk, we have created the Gaia Team Scientific Research Team. To activate it, $1 million of financing is required. This scientific report is urgently needed. We are against the clock. A world where more than $100 million are paid for the purchase of a soccer player and nobody wants to donate $1 million to save the entire planet is contradictory. We must avoid breaking the threshold of 1.5 degrees C and 2 degrees C. We cannot allow it. To do this, we can activate the SCoPEx project and apply new climate adaptation adjustment measures, aiming for zero carbon emissions by 2030. Let's work together and in a cooperative and coordinated way to save 8 billion human beings from the foreseeable tragedy of accelerated global warming. Together everything is possible. New parameters, new climate goals for 2030. Confirmed the study carried out by the Gaia team, with the support of the UN IPCC International Scientific Team, that there is a probability of more than 5% that the Clathrate rifle is activated at the North Pole, obtaining a positive response. Everything can push the ecosystem towards runaway warming, which will end with a surface temperature of 100 degrees Celsius, making the planet uninhabitable. We must immediately activate drastic, coordinated, planned and synchronized climate mitigation countermeasures, globally. The new deadline to reach zero carbon emissions is 2030. And there are only 2 to 5 years left to complete the shift of the entire energy park towards renewables and alternative energies, and replace the entire vehicle fleet with hydrogen vehicles. It is possible to do it. Since 2019, when Gomez published his first warning about the danger of positive feedbacks in exponential domino effect, accelerating global warming beyond known limits and activating tipping points or phase changes of planetary thermoequilibrium with no return, you have had time to think and plan. He has designed an emergency and alternative master plan to save the planet, based on the new emerging variables. To put it to work, everyone must cooperate: scientists, companies, governments, and consumers. Working together and synchronized. All together, we will make it. To do this work, GSL Systems, or Global Solidarity, LIVE, needs the support of the scientific sectors, businessmen, politicians, and governments in general. It requires initial capital contributions to be able to activate and deploy its large-scale projects. The plan in its initial phase consists of donating 50% of the net profit obtained by all its systems to help end hunger, extreme poverty, and global warming, inviting all multinationals to do the same for 5 years. This must be done as long as governments do not yet assume the responsibility that corresponds to them in the allocation of 2% of world GDP annually from the Green Solidarity Fund to stop global warming and end hunger and extreme poverty. 1. Banks and investment funds have a capital of $75 billion. 2. There are enough financial resources to solve the problems, it is only necessary to reorient them. 3. Once the possibility of hyperacceleration of global warming is confirmed and that runaway warming can also occur, this will be done. Let's have faith in this. One of our programs at greeninterbanks.com is to activate and develop the Forest Card credit card to finance the planting of 30 billion new trees per year. We are just beginning. The beginnings are slow and sacrificed, but people will end up understanding that everyone must participate and cooperate, because there is no other alternative, otherwise we will not survive. We have put so much pressure on the environment in such a short geological time that it could all end in runaway warming and make the planet uninhabitable. We are not proposing marches or protests, we are focusing on global strategies and concrete actions to counter the anomaly. We ask all the NGOs to join our request, all the governments of the world to approve the Solidarity Green Fund of 2% of the annual world GDP to end hunger, extreme poverty, and global warming. Without capital-intensive financing, there will be no global solutions. Through the global digital e-commerce and e-business projects brought together by Global Solidarity Live, we plan to raise capital. We will donate 80% of the profits from the megastore system to humanitarian NGOs. The other digital business units will contribute 50% of the net profit to help stop global warming and replace the energy matrix. The priorities are: 1. Unite the humanitarian and environmental NGOs of the planet to demand and urge the prompt allocation of 2 or 3% of the annual world GDP to end hunger, extreme poverty, and global warming by the governments of our planet, as advised by the UN and Master Earth. 2. Allocate $500 billion annually from the Green Global Solidarity Fund to end hunger, extreme poverty, pandemics, illiteracy, and other social injustices. 3. Act in cooperation with the scientific, business, NGO, and government sectors to reverse global warming, taking as a new goal to reach zero carbon emissions in 2030. 4. Create a coordination infrastructure to solve global crises, the global eco-government. 5. Universalize the global direct digital democracy system advised by a scientific council made up of the best scientists from all continents. 6. Replace the monetary unit with qualified time and assign life annuities to the entire population to replace the equation between capital and work by transferring production systems to AIs and robotics. 7. End inequality in the distribution of world resources by abolishing extreme poverty. To be able to do all this work, we require an initial investment of $1 million. We are managing the registration of GSL Systems as a corporation in the USA, and shareholdings for $100 million will be put up for sale. If we do not stop polluting immediately, we will not survive and we will be doomed. Simple as that. To confirm this data, the acceleration effect due to positive feedback, the scientific report of the Gaia team is required, whose financing requires a contribution of $1 million. Report that must then be confirmed or refuted by the IPCC. Either we do this or extinction. There is free will. The United Nations is currently talking about organizing the efforts of all countries to reduce carbon emissions by 45% before 2030 and reach zero emissions in 2050. This objective is insufficient since we are just a short time from the critical threshold of the abrupt chain of reaction of the release of methane gas in the polar circle, Arctic, and carbon in the other oceans of the world. It will be necessary to get to zero emissions immediately. Irreversible tipping points. Professor Johan Rockström, Director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, and Dr. David Armstrong McKay from the University of Exeter warn that giant ice sheets, ocean currents, and permafrost regions may already have passed the irreversible tipping point. The collapse of the Greenland glaciers is in an active phase and accelerating with the current increase of 1.1 degrees Celsius in global temperature. Ocean levels can rise rapidly. The North Atlantic haline current may collapse, disrupting the rainfall cycles on which billions of people depend for food. Permafrost rich in carbon and methane gas can thaw abruptly. When the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold is reached, there will be changes in the vast northern forests and losses in almost all mountain glaciers. The researchers indicate that the world is heading towards a warming of 2/3 degree C, which will trigger 16 tipping points and others in a cascade. With the possible destabilization of the Amazon rainforest and its irreversible loss, affecting the climate of the entire planet. The extinction of tropical coral reefs will also occur along with changes in the West African monsoon and the Indian summer monsoon. Moon, with probable loss of oxygen from the ocean. In addition, the melting of Antarctic glaciers will accelerate. The first 6 points of the climate of no return. 1. The collapse of the Greenland ice sheet. 2. The collapse of the West Antarctic ice sheet. 3. The collapse of ocean circulation in the polar region of the North Atlantic. 4. Extinction of coral reefs in low latitudes. 5. Sudden melting of permafrost, permanently frozen soil layer, in the northern regions. 6. Abrupt loss of sea ice in the Barents Sea. If you or your company would like to support and cooperate with the mission and goals of GSL Systems, please contact us. God does not want the extinction of life on Earth. But we as humanity must do the work to save the planet, our families and ourselves by returning to harmony and balance with Mother Nature. Everyone have faith. God gives us a second chance at redemption. We will make it. The worst mistake we are making is believing that we have time to avoid the worst. We ask God for mercy. This afternoon, April 29, 2023, I prayed with my 95-year-old mother, blind and in a wheelchair. We ask our eternal Father, Creator and faithful friend, clemency, for the whole humanity. Within an hour after this, God whispered in my ear, I heard your plea. This midnight I will send my angel of repentance to earth and he will touch the hearts of all human beings. Those who believe in me, repent of their evil deeds, fast this Sunday, unite in prayer asking for the salvation of the entire world. If they do, I'll listen to them.